Welcome to the 12 Days of Edition Wars, featuring 2nd edition AD&D players and DMs options books. In this marathon series, we are taking a close look at a set of special books that are often considered D&D 2.5. On the 10th day of Edition Wars, my DM gave to me High-Level Campaigns Part 1 with 10 Lords of Leaping over the campaigns. I don't know, high-level campaigns are appropriate to have lords in them, correct?
Well, sure. The 10 Lords of Leaping are because they're now your vassals, and you told them to leap. On the way up, they asked how high.
I see. Yes, I forgot the asking how high part. Brandis, tell me about this book.
Okay, so I'm very excited about this book. I am going to say that this book is functionally the DMG2 of all of 2nd edition. So in 2nd edition, there's nothing formally called the DMG2. In 3rd and 4th, those editions both have a book that is formally titled the DMG2, and without exception, those are some of the best books of their whole edition, because they have the freedom to go really deep on advice and weird ideas, and that's what we come here for. Advice and weird ideas.
And they're produced at a time in that edition's life cycle where the fan base might have been ready for those weird ideas, right?
Absolutely. So my thesis as we go through this book is going to be that it is a DMG2, and that its advice is going to stake it out as one of the best books of the edition. Now, I do want to make sure I give a nod to my beloved blue cover books here. The Campaign Sourcebook and Catacomb Guide, Creative Campaigning, Complete Book of Necromancers, and Monster Mythology. Also the Castle Guide, which are aimed at the same target, but they're not all maybe reaching the same bar. Sorry. I don't think any of them quite land the role of a DMG2. If any of them were going to, it'd be the Campaign Sourcebook and Catacomb Guide.
Now, that's the one written by Janelle Jaques, right?
Oh, is it?
I think so. Because that one...
Hell yes, it is.
That one is... that is full of stuff that she wrote for the DMG that they didn't have space for.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well,
that explains a lot.
Yeah. So, and she kicks ass. So...
Well, I mean that book is one that I really, really dove into hard when I finally picked it up as a second ed DM.
It's one of the few blue cover 2nd edition books that I kept. Like, I got rid of almost all my 2nd edition stuff. That's one of the books I kept.
Well, I don't stand for that sort of blasphemy of getting rid of anything ever.
Well, I have them in PDF. I got rid of the hard copy.
It's worth noting that when you heard me on air check the author, that was me having it within easy reach at all times from my recording chair. Not a joke.
Yes, which one of us knew the author?
I didn't say that you weren't older than me, Sam.
Oh, ouch!
So
ouch! Oh! I wound you, and you wound me right back. Oh.
And this is how the wars started.
Except we're on the same side. So, okay. Well, do you want to dig into this book then?
I absolutely do. And I think that it gets off to a strong start with the 7 Maxims.
Yes.
And
which I love the word maxim, and I wish that it was used more.
But not just by a, sort of all-flash, low-rent men's magazine.
Right, yes. Yes.
Playboy,
I wasn't even thinking about that. Yes.
So the 7 Maxims get a lot of essay content, and folks, I'm here for thoughtful essay content any day of the week.
Right.
I've been a blogger for 10 years, freaking, of course.
Well, let's tell our audience what they are first off.
So first off, we have don't depend on the dice. And what that really means is we're going to have a conversation about probability and how you need to inject narrative into the outcomes of the dice and not just sort of let the numbers stand and move on to the next action, which is really important advice that I do my best to remember, but the difference between an exciting fight and a not exciting fight is very often how much energy I have to put into cool descriptions and how much energy that the PCs have to, frame things in an interesting way themselves. But it talks about the key to maintaining tension in the game without inflating the level of power is to create situations where the players must rely on their own memories and reasoning skills. So it's talking about encounter design and how encounters could be testing something other than just your ability to kick out damage. And I mean, this is stuff that I have been saying for as long as I've been writing. And I mean, what you get into as we talk about developing encounter design away from just can you bash it good enough is something more like either a role-playing intensive encounter where you're fighting someone but also trying to persuade them, or we're talking about something approaching an MMO raid encounter where you have to, manage some kind of resource or stay out of the fire or whatever, and be much more engaged to succeed because of various factors. So it's really cool to see that discussed here.
So let me read a quote from the book for the audience's sake. Give your players problems that require them to think rather than roll dice. Complex political struggles, mysteries, puzzles, and the like, they challenge players directly. Keep the game centered on the characters, present the players with situations that make them search for new ways to use their characters' abilities. Do not eliminate the dice rolling altogether, however, because everyone likes to trash something once in a while.
Yep.
And players expect to be able to do that with their high-level characters' newfound powers, just like they would otherwise. So it's asking for a balanced approach. It's not saying, oh, they got to high level, suddenly we're going to shift the game and make it all about this other thing that they haven't cared about this whole time. It's saying, find ways to challenge them. And I appreciate that.
Yep. And so that is just a reminder that this is advice that people have been giving to GMs for decades, and because new GMs are always entering the hobby and experienced GMs can fall into bad habits, and even experienced adventure writers can be lazy at times.
Sure.
The advice stays fresh, and this is frankly as good of advice today as it was when it was written. Maxim number 2, intelligent adversaries, is also as good of advice today as it was when it was written. It's talking about, role-playing the creature's intelligence appropriately, not making every creature a super genius, just think about its level of intelligence and do that. Think about weaknesses and how creatures could reasonably cover for weaknesses.
And actually, this section gives you specific examples of thinking about weaknesses and thinking about strengths and how to. I mean, this is several pages here in in an effort to show, so let's talk about this great book that was just published by Keith Ammann, or I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, called The Monsters Know What They're Doing.
I was just about to bring that up. You beat me to the punch on that one.
That entire book is this part of this chapter, right? I mean, of course, greatly expanded. And it's that same idea of look at these creatures and use them to their abilities. If they're unintelligent, you would cause them to behave in an unintelligent way. But when you're getting characters that are 9th level and above, sometimes they're going to have adversaries that are more intelligent. And what do you do about that? How do you make it so that becomes an inventive, engaging interaction rather than just, kill more trolls, kill more slugs?
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, this goes into a lot of depth for individual types of monster features and individual problems that the monsters would face and need to solve, such as ranged attacks or long-term pursuit or that kind of thing. Like that's, I mean, as you say, Keith Ammann has done as well in 2019, publishing this in a longer, more detailed form as this book did when it was released, rather a few years earlier. Looks like 1995. Bad guys don't fight fair is another way to phrase the same idea. So, I mean, we could do 3 episodes just on this, and it would not be wasted time. It's just maybe a little outside our remit right now.
I could pick any of these. So the way this is formatted, there are these red sort of section headings almost. I could write a 2-page blog post on each of these little 2-paragraph sections. It's that rich. That material is that rich. So this is a nice section.
So the third maxim, control magic. And this is just about, rarity is where mystery and excitement come from, but don't be too stingy. Just think about what you're doing. Think about how magic bends reality and bends game balance, and acknowledge it and internalize it. And I mean, yeah, this is good advice. Removing unwanted magical items is always going to be a sticky wicket.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that I think this necessarily nails that particular point in its best possible way. Just because I think the only answer you can really go with is to step out of character, talk to the player, and say, look, you have something that's ruining my ability to create stories that are challenging and exciting. Can we do something? I think that operating through strictly in-character channels can send really complicated, unpleasant messages and lead to a lot of hurt feelings.
And it feels punitive for punishment's sake, rather than an actual, like, here's a consideration. I want the game to remain fun for everyone, and this particular item that you have and that you are using as much as possible is making it very difficult to challenge everyone.
Now, there's also a section on magic shops, and boy, if you want to get 500 angry comments in a Facebook post, just go talk about magic shops in the big Facebook D&D group, and then duck and cover. What can I tell you? Like, magic shops are contentious in 2019, and this takes the position that you shouldn't have, magic shops as such. Magic shouldn't become a commodity. That I have a really hard time with outright stating magic shouldn't become a commodity, because I think that is ignoring human nature too much.
Sure.
I think that when you say it shouldn't become a commodity, what you mean is it shouldn't be in the hands of the middle class. There's nothing that you can't attach a price tag to, for the wealthiest of the wealthiest in a medieval setting, or even more than that, an imperial Roman setting. The heights of wealth the wealthiest controlled, or just sort of, I guess I have this magic, but sure, I actually do want something more, like hundreds of acres of land in Gaul. Sure, I guess I'll make that trade. Well, now it's a commodity.
Sure.
Right. But my point is just trying to stop people from trading magic at all in your setting is not really the best approach to me. I think that you instead want to just put some bright lines around, how much is going to be traded by any one merchant. It isn't that you walk up to a merchant and get to treat the DMG as a shopping list. It's instead,
right.
The merchant says, here's my short list of magic items, and here's my prices, take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for a very popular example, Gilmore's Glorious Goods and Pumat Soul's shop in the Critical Role campaigns are doing exactly that. They don't have every item that's out there. They do have a wide variety of things. It's a list of things that PCs burn down fairly fast. I don't necessarily want PCs thinking of all the money they get as building up toward the next magic item. That's a very third ed and fourth ed mode that I'm glad fifth doesn't hold with as much. But to say that magic can't be a commodity is hard for me to accept, is what I want to say there.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I think the issue is where this statement was coming from. My issue with saying, so here's the thing. The reason let me put it this way. If you're a magic shop owner and you have, 100 magic items in your store, what is to stop a band of high-level, deviants from coming and raiding your magic shop and stealing everything? So, that's a rhetorical question. I know there's lots of answers I could give myself for that. But the idea is the same of if some magic shop has a particular item that is sought far and wide, it's not going to have that item very long. It's the same idea as if my party finds an artifact that has been sought after for a really long time, and it's a very famous, fabulous artifact, and word gets around that they have it. Guess what? There are going to be people coming to take it from them, right?
Sure.
It's the same idea with magic shops, right? That if you have a magic shop on every corner, well, then magic is available to every single person who walks down that street, whether it's in the form of a consumable potion or whatever, right? Theoretically speaking, right? This is all still rhetorical. It's a hypothetical, right? Because of course not everyone can afford the magic items, but that's not the point of this. The point of this is if there's a magic shop on every corner like a convenience store, then what's the point?
Well, it's the same reason that there can be a whole row of jewelry stores, and no matter how saucy one of us feels, we don't just stroll in and clean up,
right?
Because maybe we get out of Jared's without having our heads blown off. That could happen. Bad odds, but it could happen. But from that point on, you're marked, right?
Right.
And so my response to the PCs raided the magic item shop is, okay, so the owner of the magic item shop hired more adventurers to come after you and punish you to death.
Oh, see, but I'm not talking about PCs. I'm talking about any powerful thug or king or lord or whatever. Why would they allow magic shops in their town to have all these artifacts?
I mean,
You know what I'm saying? Like, why wouldn't they just confiscate those items?
I guess that you can have kings that don't believe that they need the support of their society, and like the answer is because social structures actually bind the people in control of them too.
Well, and see, that's what I'm getting at, though, right? And what I'm saying is, I think what happened is the reason this section is even in this book is that around this time, right, the Tome of Magic has been released, Spells and Magic has been released. There's all sorts of different magical items that are becoming known. There's a lot of players, and people, and the Forgotten Realms is extremely popular at this time, and Forgotten Realms is very high magic. There's magic all over that place. And I think the reason why this is presented as such is the same question that I'm asking. And your answer is the only valid answer, right? I mean, based, in the short term, right? It's the only way to quickly answer that question. But I think at this time, maybe DMs weren't able to come up with that answer, right?
Sure.
They've got players that are saying, well, this doesn't make sense, or, oh, well, how come I can't buy that exact thing I want at that magic shop because they have every freaking thing else in the book, right? So I feel like this section of the book is a response to the proliferation of the idea that magic is just everywhere, but that then translates to, well, it's there for the taking because I'm this high-level fighter or whatever.
Sure.
And that's not really how it works.
Sure. Anyway, moving on to the fourth maxim, I suppose.
Yep.
Be aware of demographics. Okay, well, I guess we're on the same topic again. But it's
Right.
it's talking about how to engage with world building. And, I mean, talking about controlling magic is world building. Well, so is being aware of demographics. And this is definitely a section that the third edition DMG is going to
expand upon.
Really, really go after.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the really surprising things about that book. Like, every DMG is going to have its own subject that the creators thought was really important and under-examined in previous editions.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, in the third ed DMG, it's demographics. Like, there is a real concept of trying to approach verisimilitude in your demographics. Now, I'm not going to say that I think it gets there, but I'm not going to say that I think it doesn't either. I think that it's still going to be about how the GM presents it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is interesting because I think it's a big jumping off point for that, because the second ed DMG didn't engage with ideas of demographics in the same way. It didn't want to talk about, who's the highest level person in this population based on population size or approximate number in 1 million. It wasn't going to come out and say specifically that there was approximately one 18th level character per million. Right? Which, interesting thing to say. Hard argument to make for Forgotten Realms. This chart doesn't work in the realms, and considering how many people in Waterdeep have been named and statted, we even have receipts. But that's
right.
fine.
Well, once again, see, but this is the same conversation as the last conversation we were having, that you run into this problem when you have a world or a setting where, well, it's a big, this is a giant sandbox that all of these D&D players are playing in, and you have to keep producing content for those D&D players. And when you produce content, they don't want to hear about the, 999,999 commoners. They want to know about the 1/18th level wizard or the 1/18th level rogue, or you know what I mean? So you end up with these NPCs that are at a much higher rates than this demographic chart.
Oh, for sure. And, I don't think that book has any real expectation that you're going to just run these numbers and make this happen.
Right.
And that's fine.
It's a thought experiment, right? It's a look, when you think about it this way, it makes it different, right? That to think about, okay, well, there's only one 18th level character of any class per 1 million individuals, right?
Right.
There's only one 18th level fighter, one 18th level wizard, right? And so therefore, that's putting a number on it that is at least imaginable, right? Like you're not saying 3 trillion, right? Never 3 trillion. Like 3 trillion is a number I can't imagine, but 1 million is a number I can kind of imagine. I've seen it throughout my life referenced, and I've seen it written, and I can imagine it.
Sure.
And I can imagine 1 million people.
Sure.
And to think, okay, well, only one of those of each class is going to be 18th level.
Right. People do have some really odd ideas about demographics when it comes to medieval societies, it has to be said. There's an article I was just reading about how messed up the demographics of Game of Thrones really are, but that's fine. You know what? Neither here nor there. Argument for another night.
Yeah. Especially because I don't know squat about Game of Thrones, but okay.
So
it would be a short conversation with me.
I'll send you the article if I can find it again. It's a good read for anyone who cares about medieval world building. Anyway.
So the point here in this book is to get the DM to think about the fact that the characters, because remember, this is about high-level campaigns. It's not talking about first-level characters for a reason, right?
Right.
The point here is when the DM is thinking about the world that these characters are now inhabiting, the DM needs to be realizing that these characters that are 9th level are rare.
Yep.
When you look in the monster manual and you see that there's a rarity value, oh, this is uncommon or this is rare. That's the same as these PCs. They are extremely rare now as soon as they get up into these higher levels.
Yep. And so that has us also moving on to the 5th maxim pretty cleanly.
Right.
Think on an epic scale. Heroes are not anonymous. Well, that is clearly just the follow-on from,
right.
An 18th level character is literally a 1 in a million individual.
Right.
And, a lot of the ideas that we're seeing here are actually things that, like I said, the 3rd ed DMG is going to engage with, but Eberron is going to put front and center of its whole setting concept, right? Because the Eberron campaign setting of 3rd ed went so far out of its way to say that by 5th or 6th level, you're starting to become one of the higher level people around, and you're just becoming a rarer and rarer commodity as you go up from about 5th or 6th level. It really emphasizes that most of the world is low level, and high level characters and high level threats are super rare. And so I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
And so heroes deserve heroic tasks with far-reaching impact, right? These are all adventure writing guidelines that really apply to both this and later editions. Like, nothing's changed here. It's all to say, sort of, you're not cleaning rats out of a basement at 15th level anymore.
This section also mentions something, though. It mentions basically what I was talking about in the magic shop section, right? Like this, that actually speaks to how well this all flows, these 7 maxims. But let me talk about what this is saying. It says the PCs set all kinds of things in motion when they enjoy the spoils of victory. A treasure as large as a dragon's hoard is bound to attract attention, perhaps even before they begin spending it. If they carry it off by normal means, thieves and brigands are bound to take notice. Once the PCs begin to spend their money, the local economy might boom from the influx of cash, especially if they spend it on things like castles, land, and businesses. However, the local economy might also suffer a ruinous inflation.
Yep.
Eventually, thieves and other adventurers learn about all the neat gems and magical items that the PCs have recovered, and they may plot to steal some of those for themselves. So that's exactly what I was trying to get at with the magic shop idea of
Yeah, for sure.
of it. It's just trying to say put consequences in. Now, whether I'm not actually even espousing that idea, whether one agrees with that idea or uses that in their game is another matter. However, they choose to do those things, but once again, this sort of idea of, well, there are consequences. There's a really fine line between consequences for actions and what feels like punishment, right? So
Sure.
you have to really be careful.
So for this, I do have to tell you about a short run campaign that a friend of mine ran years and years ago. This is in 3rd edition. We were 5th or 6th level characters. We rolled up 5th or 6th level characters to start, and he had us in the first session discover a treasure hoard of 1,000,000 gold pieces in value.
Nice.
It was a mixture of gold and magic items and other
Sure.
stuff.
Right.
And so literally the point of the campaign was, now what do you do?
Right.
Like in
Yeah.
no sense had we earned that treasure hoard,
Right.
not even a little bit. And
Right.
so it was an incredibly paranoid campaign of trying to slowly bring gold into a warehouse that we established and build up security so that we could, wind up keeping about half of the money.
Right. Right.
And then there were magic items in the hoard that did weird, horrible things, like summoning demons that we talked to about stuff. It was really, really fascinating, and it ran for maybe all of 4 sessions, but it was super interesting.
It's almost like a case study, right? It's a if you had everything your character could ever want,
exactly.
Here's the problems that come with it, right?
Yep. Yeah, it was very kind of speculative fiction in that way.
Yeah. This section ends with this sentence: remember that dragons have offspring and long memories. So, once again, though, I guess my only caveat to this, and I love this book, right? But my only caveat is you got to be careful about making something that is just a natural, what you see as the DM, what you see as a natural consequence to different events and actions. You have to be careful that it doesn't feel like punishment to the players. It's that same idea of, just take away their magic items. No, you can't do that.
Sure. I agree with that.
You have to try something else first,
I think the way I would phrase that would be that if you want something to be understood as a risk or a possible consequence, just find a way to signpost that,
Right.
and be doing that from the beginning of the campaign. Talk about, well, you can do that, but here's something that might happen. And, if you communicate the stakes to your players so they understand, well, if I have some bad rolls or make a bad move, this is what it could cost me. Well, that's just part of narrative. I mean, when we watch TV shows, like establishing stakes and risks is part of camera shots, right?
But in that case, what you're describing, then that's choice, right? And that's and you're just saying what I was trying to say, but a lot better, right? Because what I was saying was, from the DM's perspective, just make sure that you don't make it seem like you're punishing. But you're saying the way to not seem like you're punishing is just tell them. Find a way to tell them.
Right.
You don't
telegraph it.
Yeah, it's the maxim that's missing from this list is what you think is obvious is probably not obvious to the players. So, because that should be in the first DMG. That doesn't have to wait for high level stuff. If you want the players to know something, you have to tell them.
Sure, that is very fair.
But anyway, now we're off on a tangent again. So,
all right. So our next maxim is plan ahead, and I mean, I certainly agree with this for high level play. I think that for low to mid level, running up to about ninth level play, you can get away with a lot on fairly marginal planning. But certainly as you start to shift into longer term play, I mean, there's just no way. The things that villains have going on, the assets they have to have just to be threats at that level, in terms of, tricks up their sleeve, it just takes more. And this is just one of the truths of games like D&D or any White Wolf game. You hit a power level where things become a lot more complicated, because PCs, whether through magic items or spells or whatever, have a lot of really involved tricks up their sleeve that counter a lot of ordinary villain things. And you don't really want to call it an arms race. That's not quite the point. It's more starting to engage with counterplay and either thinking about how to circumvent the counterplay or to win initiative on the counterplay so that the thing has happened before they can counter it, or whatever. There's a ton of different ways to make that work, but you do have to be thinking about it if you're here to pose a threat. And so this is saying very much the same thing, and everything about this is advice that is, again, as true now as it was when it was penned. There's nothing about this that has really changed in any significant way.
None of this so far. We're on around page 28, 30, something like that. And all this advice, because it's not about mechanics, it's about the game. It's about when you sit at the table and you're playing the game, here are things that you should have thought about beforehand. It's not about, well, who gets a +1 and a +2 and what's your stat bonus and blah, blah, blah. It's about the actual game.
Right. So this is another just great section, and there's no way to to skip it. It's been presented in so many different phrasings over the years, but this is a very clean, usable one. I appreciate the reminder that not all consequences have to be bad. It's very easy as a GM to get into how can I twist the player's actions against them and make every consequence bad. And Rabbit reminded me recently that in my own campaign, I was teetering on the edge of doing that and just undoing all of their sort of the point of all their victories, and that was what I needed to hear at that moment to go back and re-examine what I was doing and rewrite some of the consequences of victory, because they actually killed a very important bad guy, and I realized that my instinct was to try to undermine that victory, and nope, that is exactly wrong. That is exactly what I need to not do. I need to instead lean into it and instead shift the scale of the campaign to have them have different kinds of problems now. So I thought that was, I think that is very salient advice to everything that's going on in this section.
Yeah, it's sort of it brings together those two sort of problematic things we talked about previously, and it says, while you're considering all those consequences that you're going to produce and make relevant in the game, also consider that some consequences should be beneficial. You can't just always have a bad consequence for the choices that the PCs are making.
Right, and most of all, I think that's because it teaches the PCs not to engage. If we can't ever improve anything, then why are we here?
Right. what's the point? You become nihilists.
And so finally, the seventh maxim is share responsibility. And this is very, very different kind of advice. It is doing something very different from the maxims before it, and
different from all the other things that were in the core rulebooks.
Oh, for sure.
In every other edition.
Right. It's talking about how to think about characters and how to think about goals and how to get useful creative input from your players that makes the campaign something they actually want to play rather than sort of whatever the GM can spew out of their imagination. And, I'm personally a pretty big proponent of let's see what I can spew out of my imagination and see how I can make it appeal to you. But I think that my twist on this would just be to learn to listen to what the players are doing and saying in character and take from that what they want to see. There's a transparent, out of character communication about it is helpful if you haven't established sort of a way of communicating about things, or if you get off the same page, that out of character communication is good for getting you back on it. But I care so much about making sure that there are new secrets for players to go after that I don't want them to be investigating secrets they invented. I don't think that's fun.
Yeah.
But that said, this is also specifically addressing bookkeeping and really engaging with, if you've played a campaign from early levels and have gotten to high levels, there are now so many NPCs and factions and goals bouncing around that you need to just delegate some of the brain power. And that I think I agree with a bit more. In my last session, there were 2 NPCs that came along in the adventure, and it wasn't the PCs needed their strength to win. It's that it was very narratively appropriate in my eyes that those NPCs would come along on the adventure because of what they cared about. Both the PCs and the villain are things that they cared about, and so they wanted to be there and were willing to stick their necks out to come along. And so I had PCs run those characters in combat. I ran them on the role-playing side. The PCs ran them in combat. And it mostly worked. There were some minor issues. There are things I could have handled better and things I'll be trying to handle better in the future. But, ultimately it was very similar to the sidekick rules from the Unearthed Arcana article and the
Essentials kit.
Essentials kit, thank you. So yeah.
This is the, so I feel like this is the maxim that I feel was possibly came across as the most groundbreaking or caused the most problematic murmurings when it was written.
Yep.
I feel like nowadays, once again, this is pulling in. Nowadays, we sort of pull in so many different elements from different games, and the designers of games pull in different elements of things they enjoy, and it's seen as an okay thing, if not expected, to get buy-in from the players and to share the responsibility of certain things at the table, and just different. Those suggestions have been floating around for years now. But when this article was written, when this book was written, that wasn't the case necessarily. at least not at D&D tables. So this was something new. Now, looking back on it, 20 years later, more than 20 years later, it's it's not all that groundbreaking. But at the time, I appreciate it for what it was trying to do at the time.
Yep.
It would probably need a lot of reworking, a lot more maybe than some of the previous sections. I mean, the previous maxims, the way that they're discussed, I could basically take those and put them into my blog with very little change. Not that I would do that because that would be plagiarism, but you get my idea, right? I
Sure.
could take them and put them with very little change in my blog, and they would be advice that's perfectly relevant right now to this edition, with almost no change. Whereas this one, number 7, I would have to change it. I would have to update it.
Okay, that's fair. So does that pretty much cover us for Chapter 1?
That covers Chapter 1.
Chapter 2 is immense. It is a monster chapter. But I tell you what, a whole lot of this chapter is going to be us saying again, yep, that's good advice. That is correct.
Yeah.
And I guess what I want to say about that is, like, especially because Chapter 2 is drilling down more, but even in Chapter 1, like, this good advice isn't a mystery. It is not wisdom handed down through some kind of cultic initiation. This is a framing of things that are foundational, and it's just we don't always remember that some of this is getting taken for granted. Like, this isn't always framed directly in a DMG 1 for any edition.
Well, let me just read. Here's what I want to do for the audience. I want to. This chapter has the very first few pages of it have these different little subheadings. I just want to read you the subheadings so you can get an idea of the beginning of this chapter. Here's the first subheading. Don't tell. It's talking about adventures, okay? Don't tell, show. Don't overplan, prepare. Don't force the action, deal with encounters, balance combat versus creativity. Don't inflate, instead you should enhance. Gifts and rewards. It talks about gifts versus rewards. Creating multiple threats. Don't kill, scare. Having character knowledge. Don't ignore the rules. Be proactive, not reactive. Be responsive, not passive. Not all failures have to be catastrophic. That's the introduction to this chapter about adventures.
Yep.
I could write that today about 5th edition.
Yep, everything in here is good, important stuff, and I mean, I've got volumes and volumes of advice that are alternate phrasings of a lot of this stuff, and dear friend of the show, Mike Shea, has done quite well for himself with some particular phrasings of don't overplan, prepare.
And I mean, that's not to disparage. That's just saying,
no.
Sometimes you need to update the language a little bit, and sometimes the way that this is what I tell my students all the time. It's okay if you don't like me as an instructor, right? Like I might not be your favorite professor because I might not present things the way that you need to hear them.
Right.
My method, my way of talking, my cadence, the words I use may not be the thing that you need in your brain to understand this material. That's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
I try to do lots of things to fix that, to make sure I do, cover a lot of bases and try to hit a large swath of students. But it's the same idea here, right? I could take all this advice and I could turn it into my own blog post, and it'll be using my words and the way that I think of things and the way that the examples I would pick. And that might speak to somebody now more than if they read the same section that said basically the same thing.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's what all this writing and all of our opinions and all that's all about.
Well, and what I also want to say about this is that I've spent years and years as a LARP runner, and so this advice isn't even specific to D&D or the medium of tabletop games. all of the headers that you came through, I mean, this works perfectly in the Buffer LARP campaigns I have played and run for years. Just every word of this is relevant and useful in terms of how to think about both. Basically, everything scaling from encounters to adventures to campaigns. Just every part of the different scale of events in the course of a campaign, this advice is relevant and you need to be thinking through it. But I think that we are not going to try to plow through Chapter 2. I think we're going to make that the end of this episode.